I Hate the News is the weekly news bulletin from I Hate Politics podcast, a show about a human activity we love to hate. I'm Sunil Dasgupta. It's July 29th, 2025. Several years in the making, Montgomery County Council upzones some parts of the county to allow 2 and 3 unit buildings, but not without controversy. Impact taxes affect housing affordability. But do you know where they go? Gaithersburg Mayor Judd Ashman explains a just concluded agreement with Montgomery County, also a long time in the making. The city of Rockville is still negotiating. Montgomery County courts awarded an MCPS teacher $500,000 in damages for false accusation of racism by the school district. There is another case in the courts right now involving at least 3 teachers who were punished by MCPS for anti-Semitic speech. The teachers deny the charges. New economic analysis of the RFK Stadium in Washington, D.C. says long-term revenue projections are higher without building the stadium. But it's never that simple, is it? Maryland House of Delegates Majority Leader David Moon is proposing trigger legislation that will open mid-decade redistricting in the state if another state breaks the once in 10 years norm. And more. Stay with us.
I Hate Politics is brought to you by the Political Science Program at UMBC Shady Grove, where you'll learn a strong foundation in public policy, pre-law, and international affairs for an impactful career in a number of essential areas. Learn more at shadygrove.umbc.edu.
She got a face that you can't read, like it was chiseled there in stone. Shows all the pain, the troubles she has known.
I Hate Politics is a podcast about our neighborhoods, workplaces, schools and streets, and our local governments as they function in diverse and democratic societies. This means our politics are messy, dirty, sometimes corrupt, with often self-serving politicians. But no matter how much we may hate politics, we are never exempt from it, even when we refuse to participate. In fact, the purpose of politics is to keep society functioning, precisely when we don't agree with each other, like now. Music for this episode comes from DC area roots band, The Longtimers. Tom Clifford on vocals and guitar, Ben Holmes on drums and vocals, Mo Nelson on upright bass and vocals, and Pete Rose on guitars and vocals. You can find them at Hank Beatles Tavern on Rockville Pike and other musical establishments in the area.
Each time she got burned, she can't tell you nothing about love. She don't know what it's like to be cared for. She's got all the answers till you ask her about love. No one's ever loved a girl before.
Hi, Sunil. It's Rebecca Kushmiter. I just wanted to share a couple updates from MCPS. They have announced a few things since we talked for the episode last Friday. At the Board of Education meeting on July 24th, MCPS gave updates about the program study. The updates included slides that said students in centrally managed programs would be able to stay in their programs through their graduation. Centrally managed programs are any programs where students apply through the county, either criteria-based or lottery-based, and it includes students who exercise school choice via the DCC or NEC. This grandfathering policy applies to students in the classes of 28, 29, and 30. When MCPS and Dr. Taylor explained it further, they indicated that they would roll out new programs one grade at a time, starting in fall of 2027, and they would simultaneously roll back old programs. So in 2027, ninth graders coming into high school for the first time would be in the new program system. system, while 10th through 12th graders would be in the old system. Then in 2028, 9th and 10th graders will be in the new system, and 11th and 12th graders will be in the old system, and so on. The old system would sunset completely with graduation 2030, and the new system would be in place at all grade levels in fall of 2031. Now, this only applies to the programs. It does not apply to how boundary changes will be implemented. Dr. Taylor said the grandfathering policy for the new boundaries is still undetermined.
Montgomery County courts awarded $518,000 in damages to former Bethesda Chevy Chase high school teacher Dan Engler. Engler sued the school principal and the Montgomery County Board of Education for false accusation of racism in a communication sent from the school to families, where he was accused of not being able to distinguish between two African American students. The email to families was entitled Hate Bias Incident. Engler's complaint argued that he was merely asking students to sit in their assigned seats, which helped him keep track of student names. The court found the principal was not liable, but held the school district responsible for making false accusations. An MCPS spokesperson said that the school district is still considering whether or not to appeal. There is another similar case in the courts right now involving at least 3 teachers who were punished by MCPS for reportedly anti-Semitic speech. All 3 teachers deny the charges and say they merely expressed support outside of school venues for Palestine and Palestinians. Legal precedent, going back almost 60 years, says that public school employees can be removed for speech if it disrupts functioning of the school system. The standard applies even if the teacher has used speech outside of school in venues unrelated to school. MCPS has rules that specifically include social media use as part of school disruption. Whether the courts will uphold the wide standard at a time when First Amendment rights are politically salient is unknown, especially since the demand for these rights in this case comes from an arguably minority position in the United States.
Much time making love to everyone else. She never took the time off to find love for sale. But you light another cigarette, slowly shake her head.
Last week, Montgomery County Council in Maryland passed new zoning law to allow duplexes and triplexes and some apartments to be built in certain designated corridors near transit across the county, where these types of housing were previously prohibited. Many existing residents have protested the change, believing that the new zoning will change their neighborhoods in undesirable ways. Too much traffic, overcrowded schools, trees cut down, stormwater management made worse, but the county has a housing availability and affordability problem that is believed to be deterring new residents and businesses from wanting to move here. The measure passed 8-3, but not before Council President Kate Stewart, who supported the law, scolded residents gathered in the council room to protest.
I'm gonna ask you to not, please do not. I'm gonna take a moment. We're gonna take a moment and we're gonna take a breath, because this is Montgomery County. And in Montgomery County, we can disagree respectfully. And I ask you all to do that today. We've heard already from other colleagues. We have heard from our excellent staff. Now I ask you to please let everyone speak, because this is Montgomery County. And I have to say, these signs with bombs and our pictures on them, terrible. This is not Montgomery County.
Okay, now.
No.
No.
I'm pleased.
You have sat here and called us racist. You have sat here, yes, you said, Natalie has said that we.
Ms. Persad, I have Please, I'm asking that we are better than this in Montgomery County, and we can disagree respectfully. And I'm asking you to allow everyone up here to speak and to agree that here we can listen to each other and we can disagree and move forward. Councilmember Natalie Fan-Gonzalez, please continue.
Thank you so much, Madam President.
Council members Will Joando, Kristen Mink, and Sidney Katz oppose the new law, but it is the term-limited County Executive Mark Elrich who has had the harshest criticism. In a media briefing the day after the law passed, he said
that this will not increase affordable housing. It absolutely will not increase affordable housing unless you radically change the definition of affordable housing. What it will do is impact communities and displace residents currently living in affordable houses if those residents are renters, which many of them are, as well as being minorities. This plan never engaged the community. People are told what the planning board is going to do and what the council is going to do. And the amount of civic engagement is appallingly low. The council has now established a precedent that we don't need plans. We don't need to abide by the master plan. And we can change a neighborhood. If we decide that a neighborhood should have a higher percentage of businesses in it, whether we should insert commercial districts in the middle of neighborhoods. All these things the council's basically said it can do without having to go through a master plan process. It's kind of appalling, and it's no wonder that residents are worried. And what I think people need to think about is this going to make people say, do I want to live in Montgomery County where I don't have any certainty as to where I'm moving? Or should I go to counties where they're not doing stuff like this?
Officially, the county executive does not sign off on zoning changes like he would have to do for other laws. So for now, the change is going ahead. Elrich plans to return to the county council after being term limited as county executive, and by then, one of the council members running for county executive should be in the other office. Will Joando, Evan Glass, and Andrew Friedson have announced that they are all running to be county executive.
Hoping you'll hold on to every word she said. But she can't tell you nothing about love.
Talking about housing affordability, a big reason why housing is expensive in places like Montgomery County is because the county charges developers money that is intended to go to infrastructure development made necessary by the new housing. These are called impact taxes and come in two forms: schools and transportation. The schools impact taxes goes to schools capital spending. The transportation impact taxes go to specific transportation projects. The city of Gaithersburg just approved an agreement with the county government to spend some of the transportation impact taxes that have been accumulating on behalf of the city since 2006. Here is Gaithersburg Mayor Judd Ashman with the backstory.
Around 2002 or 2003, the county implemented impact taxes. And the thinking is that when new developments come in, they affect the infrastructure. And so they should have to help fund improvements in infrastructure to help with roads and transportation and with education. So there's the transportation impact tax, and then there's the school impact tax. What happened with the transportation impact tax is that the cities of Gaithersburg and Rockville have their own planning and zoning. And so when the county passed their impact tax, our cities were a little skeptical about whether they should have the authority, the county should have the authority to levy this impact tax on Gaithersburg and Rockville projects. How would we know that they wouldn't take this money from a Gaithersburg and Rockville project and not spend it on transportation projects elsewhere outside of Gaithersburg and Rockville? So in order to keep us from taking them to court, the county offered to sign this MOU, this Memorandum of Understanding with both of our cities. It's a little separate. It's a little different for each city, but mostly the principle is the same. It says that we'll collect our taxes. Anything that comes from a Gaithersburg or Rockville project, we're going to keep in a separate account. And then the cities of Gaithersburg and Rockville can work in conjunction with the county to determine how those funds are spent. So that's how it started. Our MOU was signed in 2006. Since that time, the city of Gaithersburg's had one project that has successfully gone through and been reimbursed by the county. We've had a lot of instances in which we've presented projects to them in advance, and they've said, well, that doesn't really qualify, or
Do they have a right to determine what qualifies and what doesn't qualify?
Well, you know how possession is 9/10 of the law. They have the account, right? Now, they legally cannot spend down that account without approval with the city. But with the original MOU with the city of Gaithersburg, which happened before I was even on the city council, specified specific projects that could be funded with this. And what's happened is either those projects haven't come to fruition, or there have been other projects that the city has said, well, this should qualify. And the county's like, well, it really doesn't. Anyway, we've gone back and forth for a number of years about what projects should qualify, should get us the reimbursement. And we've been in negotiations with the county, I would say, for 15 of those years. We had an agreement with County Executive Ike Leggett back in 2018, but then the county council would not ratify the agreement. And so we're back to the drawing board. It's been a long, long time. Now we have 15.4 million plus in this account, and we're excited to be at the table to have this approval, which now the city has ratified. We need the signature of the county executive, and then it will have to go to the county council for a ratification.
Mayor Ashman, thank you.
My pleasure.
The city of Rockville is still negotiating its agreement with the county, and they are looking at about $8.2 million and hoping to get $6.7 million, while the county gets to keep $1.5 million. That $1.5 million will go to the Route 355 Rockville Pike Bus Rapid Transit and the Great Seneca Transit Network. Like Gaithersburg, Rockville also has a long list of pedestrian and bike safety projects it wants to fund with the money.
She don't know what it's like to be cared for. She's got all the answers till you ask her.
In Washington, D.C., new economic analysis of the RFK Stadium says long-term revenue projections are higher if the stadium is not built and instead there is more housing. But city public finance expert Yashim Sain of the DC Policy Center questions whether a no stadium scenario will precipitate the investment in housing necessary for that option to be realized.
It compares two scenarios. One is a scenario where there is a stadium and a mixed-use development around the stadium, as the mayor has proposed and the council is about to finalize. And the other is an alternative scenario where there is no stadium and the bulk of the site is dedicated for housing and other mixed use. And basically what they are showing is that the stadium acts like an anchor and creates investments earlier than the alternative where there's no anchor, it's just housing development. So that starts bringing revenues much earlier because the investment is done much earlier, the construction is done much earlier. But in the long run, because the alternative, which is many more housing units, creates new residents and income tax base, in the long run, the contribution of the alternative development without a stadium is greater for the city. That's something that the economists have said all the time, and these findings are not surprising. I do agree with the premise that this kind of investment by the sports team and the city, the infrastructure investment by the city and the investment in the stadium and ultimately in the housing by the stadium does create an earlier start date because there's committed financing. The biggest problem we have right now in the city is you don't see any housing permits anymore. You don't see any new groundbreakings in housing. Investors are not interested in the district. Interest rates are high, and some of the regulatory concerns also push people out. So we're not seeing any new groundbreakings in housing. So one way to really ask this question might have been, how many years of difference between the groundbreaking under two scenarios would have yielded equal revenue?
So the stadium gets built in 2031. That's when it starts to produce revenue. But if you look at the no stadium scenario, the revenue starts in 2034. So there's a 3-year differential. So I am not sure what this short-term, long-term kind of distinction is.
There's actually like a 10-year difference. Mixed-use construction is completed under the stadium scenario by 2036. In the mixed-use, no stadium scenario, the construction completes at 2046. The real issue is, they made their assumptions as best as they can, given the charge that they want to fulfill. But the big unknown, what we don't know is, will it really be 2033 when groundbreaking starts happening under a no stadium scenario? We are not seeing robust commercial development activity as we had seen before. And, there needs to be first, the city still needs to commit the infrastructure. Like that $1 billion we're going to spend it one way or the other. You need to look at the investor interest under two different scenarios. I would not think of it as like one probability, but I can probably say that by 2026 that there will be investor interest in the alternative without a stadium is pretty close to zero.
Oh, okay. So you don't think that the alternative scenario actually exists?
The alternative scenario doesn't exist in 2026. And that's what the council's budget office did. They said they discounted that probability all the way to 2033, right? They said until 2033, we don't see enough investor interest for this to happen. Talking about revenue in 2060, it's the value of revenue in 2060 is zero. To me, it's worth zero.
Yashim saying thank you.
It's always fun.
Nothing about love, she ain't got it. Nothing about love, she ain't got it. Nothing about love, she can't give it. Nothing about love, she ain't got it.
It has been a long-standing tradition that states change congressional electoral districts every 10 years to account for population shifts in line with consideration of overall seat allocation to states. But Texas and a handful of Republican states are making noises to redistrict congressional seats mid-decade. And Maryland Democratic State House Majority Leader David Moon has proposed trigger legislation that will open mid-decade redistricting in his state if Texas or another state breaks the once in 10 years norm.
I've actually requested that legislation be drafted, and it says quite specifically that if any state goes off schedule and decides to redraw congressional districts twice this decade, that it would automatically trigger Maryland reopening its redistricting process and likewise conducting a second congressional redistricting.
I am assuming that that Maryland has, or the Maryland Democratic Party has scope to change the district in such a way that it can favor itself. Is that the case?
My goal in this is regardless as to election outcomes or partisan outcomes. But again, if we're simply trying to uphold the well-established norm that states only redistrict once every decade, and we're doing it because of changing population, that's really the norm I'm trying to uphold here. Now, granted, Texas did this one other time in 2003, much to our dismay, and everybody ignored it like it was some weird thing going on. In other words, they got away with it. So this time I'm saying no. I mean, as to your question about outcomes and all that, if you go back to the official redistricting in Maryland, when we went through the ordinary process, the Democrats in Annapolis proposed a map. It was sued by the Republicans, and we end up basically settling on something closer to the existing maps, and the court case just never went to the state Supreme Court. But obviously, there was something about that map that was initially proposed that worried members of the minority party.
Maryland has 8 seats. Texas has God knows how many. I don't know offhand. Are you going to work with California or New York? Some, bulk up?
I think if Texas and other states actually do this, you will see blue states do this. It's everybody's hope that this doesn't actually materialize. No one wants to actually do this. I think the preference for all of us who are trying to, tack to democratic norms and rule of law here is once a decade. Good Lord.
When do you think you'll have a text ready to share for your?
I may have more than one version of this to share. I've actually already cooked 2 versions of this policy. One is a bill to refer the matter through the redistricting process, and the second is to refer the matter directly to the voters.
Good luck.
Thank you.
That's all for this episode. Be sure to check out our feature interview series that come out Friday mornings. I Hate Politics is produced by me, Sunil Dasgupta, with support from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. I direct UMBC's political science program at the universities at Shady Grove in Montgomery County, where, among other things, we explore and learn about politics, government, and society close to home. Music for this episode comes from DC area roots band, The Longtimers. Tom Clifford on vocals and guitar, Ben Holmes on drums and vocals, Mo Nelson on upright bass and vocals, and Pete Rose on guitars and vocals. You can find them at Hank Dietl's Tavern on Rockville Pike and other musical establishments in the area. If you want to share your music on the show or know someone else who might want to, please email us at producer@ihppod.org. I hope you'll subscribe and share the podcast as we bring you stories about politics close to you and to your home. See you next time.